I spent 5 years being a devoted stepfather, but my wife's child constantly disrespected me, insisting that I was nothing to him. You are nothing to me. You are nobody. So when it came to paying for college, I urged him to let his true father pay for it. I never expected to share my tale, but I needed to get it off my chest. My name is Robert and I'm 45 years old. I operate a highly successful elite wine bar in town that I constructed entirely from scratch and am really proud of. That pub introduced me to someone 5 years ago, or so I thought at the time. Melissa was a bookkeeper I recruited to assist with the financial aspects of my firm. She was intelligent, efficient, and exuded a subtle elegance that captivated me. She was more than just adept at her profession, she had a lovely personality. Something that made spending late nights reviewing financial reports a little less tiresome. At first we kept it professional. She was new to the team and I didn't want to overstep. But as the weeks progressed, I found myself staying in her office a little bit longer. Making excuses to check on her work just to be near her. Finally I made the first move. "Let me take you to dinner," I said one evening after we had done studying the books. She hesitated briefly before smiling. "Are you asking as my boss or as a man?" "As a man." That supper led to another and another. And before I knew it, we were discussing our future together. Everything looked amazing. Melissa was attentive. Her kid Ethan was nice and courteous. And I felt as if I had finally discovered the family I'd always desired. We got married after 1 year of dating and Melissa and Ethan moved into my house. At first things went smoothly. I basically jumped right into being the greatest stepfather I could be. I accompanied Ethan to sporting events, assisted him with school tasks, and ensured he had all he required. I paid for family vacations, bought him all of the latest sneakers he desired, and did everything I could to provide him with the life I hoped I had when I was younger. He would see his father from time to time. To be honest, knowing what I did in the past did not make me feel completely at ease. According to what I knew, Kevin had virtually burned down their old flat several times while drunk. This is why he lost custody in the first place. But Melissa urged that Ethan retain that connection. "He's still his father," she would remark when I expressed my concerns. "Ethan needs to know his dad still cares about him." I saw him at a school event once and he didn't appear sober. There was something about the way he swayed while standing still. His eyes were unable to focus. But I kept my mouth quiet. After all, who am I to interfere? I was only the stepfather, correct? God, I wish I had known then what I know now. If only I had known then that my desire to be the ideal stepfather could have blinded me to what was really going on. But hindsight is 20/20, right? And the real crisis hadn't even started. Not even close. Time went by and Ethan turned 18 years old. Both his birthday and graduation were approaching. And this made him walk around the house like a frightened wreck. He constantly said, "What if something goes wrong? What if people don't come? What if this isn't perfect?" One evening when I noticed him overthinking, I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Hey, everything is fine," I said to him. "As a matter of fact, I've got a brilliant idea. Why don't we hold your party at the bar? We can reserve the best section in the house." His eyes immediately brightened up. I knew my wine bar had become a popular destination in town. And Ethan had been eager to show it off to his friends. "Really?" he asked, already reaching for his phone. "Oh my God, my Instagram is going to be insane. Everyone at school is going to be so jealous." I threw myself into preparations. I wanted things to be perfect for him. I even brought him shopping for a designer suit, a sleek black one that made him look like a junior businessman. He looked every bit the young professional in the suit. I nodded, indicating my approval. "How many guests do you think you're going to invite?" I inquired one evening as we were discussing the details. He fiddled with his phone for a time, appearing to hesitate. "About 30 people." "Great. Can you send me a guest list so that I can make sure we have enough space and food for everyone?" "Oh, I don't really have one yet," he replied swiftly. "Just plan for 30, okay?" In retrospect, I wish I had advocated for the list. But I was so focused on getting everything ready. The tables were set. The light was golden and pleasant. The atmosphere at Upper West Wine Bar was nothing short of ideal. It had been converted into the perfect location for an 18-year-old's birthday, sophisticated yet youthful, with a carefully curated menu of virgin cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Ethan looked great in his cut black suit, standing alongside a group of his pals, laughing and taking photos. Melissa's family was present, socializing with his classmates, and everything appeared to be going perfectly. Then he walked in. I recognized Kevin even before he spoke. He swayed unevenly with each step, his eyes hazy. He wasn't sober. "I'm here to wish my son a happy birthday," he exclaimed loudly, catching the attention of the attendees. I was sitting next to Ethan when his father came over to our table, his expression filled with disdain. "Get up," he mumbled, waving his hand dismissively. "That's my seat. I'm his real father, not you." My voice remained calm and measured. "There is ample seating with the other guests at the next table. Why don't you join them?" "No." This time his voice was sharper, nearly growling. "This is my place. You need to leave." "My place? Who do you think you are?" I expected Melissa to interfere. To do something. Anything. To calm the situation. But she sat there pale, staring down at her hands as if they contained the solutions to all her problems. I took a deep breath and braced myself. It was Ethan's night. I wasn't going to let it get fully wrecked when I could avoid it. "Let me be crystal clear," I continued, my gaze fixed on Kevin's. "You have two options. Take a seat at the next table with the other guests or have security escort you out." His face contorted in rage. "Oh, listen to you, Mr. Moneybags, throwing his weight around?" He spat, swaying slightly as he leaned on the table's edge for support. "You think you can buy everything, don't you? Buy my son? Buy my family's love?" Other guests began to stare. I could see some of my regulars at surrounding tables pretending to seem uninterested but plainly paying attention to every word. My workers lurked around the room's boundaries waiting for my cue. "You just waltz in here with your fancy bar, your big house." Kevin spat again, his voice rising with each sentence. "Think you can replace me just because you've got money? Well, guess what, you can't buy family." And before anyone could react, he reached out and threw a dish of charcuterie to the floor. The crash of glass broke the sudden dead silence of the bar. And then another and another. Fine cheeses and cured meats were strewn across the pricey marble flooring. A bottle of imported sparkling water tipped over and spilled upon the beautiful wood of the bar. I got my security team's attention and gave them a modest nod. They moved in smoothly and professionally, just as they had been trained. "Sir, it's time for you to leave," the head of security stated, forcefully seizing Kevin's arm. I watched them walk him out. His inebriated complaints turned into slurred, unintelligible cries that bounced off the walls before the front door swung shut behind him. Silence. The guests' murmur resumed gradually, however. I rose and smiled brightly like my owner. "Really sorry about this, ladies and gentlemen, please let the evening go on. Drinks are on the house." It didn't bother the regulars. They were used to it. After a few minutes they returned to their chats. But at our table Ethan's friends and relatives sat down. The whispers were incessant. I could see them cast glances toward Ethan, Melissa and me. By dawn the tale would have spread widely on social media. Ethan sat up straight and moved the food on his plate about. The sleek outfit that had previously made him appear so grown up now seemed to swallow him, making him small and defenseless. The Instagram-perfect celebration he had envisioned had swiftly turned into a nightmare. After about an hour he moaned, "I have a headache, can we go home?" The party ended shortly after that. People offered polite excuses, but I could hear them whispering as they went. "Poor Ethan. Did you see his dad? Can you believe what happened?" Ethan went to his room as soon as we entered the house. I followed the girls upstairs and entered his room to speak with him. "Say something." The next morning. The morning after the catastrophic birthday celebration, Ethan arrived at breakfast with circles under his eyes. He sat down in his chair, his gaze focused on his lap. "How are you feeling, buddy?" I inquired kindly. "Fine," he mumbled into his cereal dish. And that was all. One word. The next days felt like I was living in a haunted house. Ethan, who used to be active and gregarious, had become almost unrecognizable. Every time I entered a room where he was conversing with Melissa, he would go silent as if someone had pressed the mute button. One evening after Ethan had gone to bed, I attempted to discuss it with Melissa. "Don't you think we should do something? Maybe get him to talk to someone?" She waved her hand dismissively. "He's fine. He's just processing what happened. Give him space." But it wasn't okay. None of this was okay. Despite the stress in our household, we all went to Ethan's graduation ceremony. Melissa and I sat in the crowd, and when his name was called I applauded so hard that my hands hurt. He looked terrific in his cap and gown. And for a minute as he looked our way and smiled I thought maybe things were finally improving. Of course we had a party later at our house. I knew I needed to do everything correctly. His favorites were all present. Truffle fries. Steak sliders. He would regularly take small crab cakes from the rear of the kitchen at the bar. Even the absurd 3-tiered chocolate cake, which should have taken at least a week to perfect. His classmates arrived and for a time the house was filled with laughing and exciting conversation about college plans and summer getaways. For a few hours everything seemed almost normal again. Ethan smiled. Talking. He looks like his old self. I began to relax. I wondered if we'd turned a corner. Then his phone rang. Ethan stepped out into the hallway to answer it, and when he returned a few minutes later there was something strange about his expression. A peaceful resolution. He approached me directly for the first time in days with any degree of willingness. My dad is coming over, he added. He wants to congratulate me on graduating. My stomach sank. Absolutely not, I responded without hesitation. The memories of his birthday calamity are still too clear. Ethan, think about what happened at your birthday. He showed up drunk. Caused a scene. Destroyed property. That was your fault, Ethan interrupted me, his voice rising. None of that would have happened if you had just moved and let him sit down. He's my real dad. You should have just stepped aside. I stood there feeling as if I'd been punched in the stomach. All the time. After several days of stillness? Was this what he had been thinking? Was I the one to blame? I turned urgently to Melissa. I was hoping for once that she would say something. Simply step up. Be the mother that Ethan needed. I said, please Melissa. Tell him how inappropriate his father's behavior was at the birthday party. But she sat there. Looking at her hands as if they held the mysteries of the cosmos. The same quiet. Same cowardice. The same thing I saw in the wine bar that night. Something inside of me cracked. 5 years of being the ideal stepfather. 5 years of treading on eggshells. 5 years of making excuses for everyone else's actions. 5 years of enduring frustration, and everything started gushing out. Listen to me, Ethan, I replied clearly and firmly. That was my wine bar. I set that whole party up for you. I got you that damn designer suit you wanted. I did absolutely everything to make that night perfect. And your dad? He arrived drunk. Publicly shamed you. And now has property damages. He didn't even get you a present, Ethan. All he did was bring chaos and embarrassment. In an instant Ethan's expression changed from angry to furious. No. Ethan's face changed from angry to furious in an instant. Oh my God, here we go again, he exclaimed, throwing up his hands. It's all about the money with you, isn't it? I paid for this, I bought that. You think because you have money you can control everything? He turned to face his classmates who were standing awkwardly in the living room, clearly wishing they were somewhere else. My real dad will be here soon, he remarked with a sour laugh. It'll be nice to finally have a normal person here instead of this. He motioned toward me as if I were some filth he had stepped on. Your father is not coming into this house, I attempted to explain, adjusting my voice to counteract the rising rage and hurt within me. That was when Ethan completely lost it. His face turned red and he started ranting at me in front of the entire crowd. You're not my dad, he yelled. You're nothing to me, you're nobody. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Keep your nose out of my life, you're just some guy my mom married for his money. The room fell completely silent. I could see his friends fidgeting uncomfortably, some checking their phones, some staring at the ceiling. Ethan went back to them, his voice venomous. Let's get out of here. I don't want to celebrate in his house anyway. He underlined his as if it were filthy. His friends hurriedly filed out without making eye contact with me. The front door slammed so hard that the windows trembled. I stood there. Alone. In my own apartment. Surrounded by discarded food and strewn dishes. Hit by a simulated truck. This had to be it. It needed to be enough. Melissa would eventually. At last. Say something. Would she defend me after this? Mel? Melissa cleared her throat. She spoke coldly, detached. You had no right to throw the house and money in his face like that, she told him bluntly. You didn't need to remind him this is your house, that your money pays for everything. That was low. I stared at her. I saw her for the first time. You've got to be kidding me right now. Where were you when your ex was hurling plates across my wine bar? Where were you just now when your son stood up in front of his entire graduating class and started screaming insults at me? Melissa simply shook her head. As if I were the insane one. You're the adult here, she retorted. You should know better than to get into an argument with a teenager. I gave out a sour laugh. And you should know better than to bury your head in the sand like a coward, I said. But that's what you do, isn't it? You just sit there silently while your ex-husband and your son treat me like garbage. Well, guess what? I'm done being everyone's punching bag. Melissa's expression darkened. She didn't say anything. She turned and began walking upstairs. A few minutes later I heard the slam of the guest room door. The next morning breakfast seemed like a funeral. Melissa sat across from me pushing scrambled eggs aimlessly around her plate while avoiding eye contact. I was just about to rise and leave the table when Ethan burst into the kitchen. Still dressed for last night's graduation celebration. I detected his beer breath somewhere between his door and the table. I looked sideways at Melissa waiting for something. Anything. Her teenage son reeked of alcohol. Coming home at 9 a.m. However, as was often the case, she said nothing. She only stared at her plate. Where have you been all night? I inquired neutrally. Ethan turned to face me, his bloodshot eyes filled with hate. None of your business, he scoffed. You're not my dad. You're not anyone. Just some empty space taking up room in this house. Then he turned and staggered upstairs to bed. Melissa just sat there. Once again there was silence. By this point I was beginning to believe that silence was some kind of superpower she possessed. The week that followed was like trying to live in a house haunted by the poltergeist from hell. Ethan would not speak to me directly. Instead he would speak about me as if I were not present. Dad, he'd tell Melissa, pointing to me as if I were a piece of furniture. Can you ask your husband to pass the salt? Or he'd walk into a room and tell his mother, this guy is in my way. And then simply stand there waiting for me to move. I said nothing, I kept watching. 5 years. I'd wasted 5 years trying to be the ideal stepfather. Now, I was out. Let them show their true colors. And boy was I prepared for a show and tell. Sunday. Melissa and I sat down for another silent dinner. Then Ethan burst into the dining room waving an envelope around as if he'd won the lottery. Dad, I got in, he exclaimed, almost jumping up and down. NYU accepted me. I got into my dream school. I saw him run up to Melissa and hug her tightly. They were both grinning ear to ear. Ethan then turned to her and with a sneer that I will never forget said, tell your husband he needs to pay for my tuition. Something inside me has just snapped. I smiled, but it was not a warm, pleasant smile. A chilly and sharp one. I won't be paying for your college education, I stated emphatically. You've made it very clear that I'm not your father. I'm nobody, remember? Well, guess what? This nobody's wallet is closed. Why don't you ask your real dad to pay for college? Ethan's cheeks became an awful shade of red. You vindictive piece of. He began shivering, tears welling in his eyes. But I didn't feel anything. You're doing this to punish me. You're just evil. I stood there strangely calm as he screamed insults at me. It was like witnessing a hurricane from a window. I could see the turmoil, but it couldn't affect me anymore. Mom! Ethan exclaimed to Melissa. Make him pay, he has to pay. Melissa cleared her throat, adopting the patronizing tone I had come to despise. Come on honey, quit joking around, she told me. You know you need to pay for Ethan's education. I pulled back my chair and stood up. I've made myself perfectly clear. I will not pay tens of thousands of dollars in tuition for someone who spent weeks telling me I'm nothing to him. Someone who treats me as if I don't exist in my own home. Then I turned and left the dining room. Ethan's shrieks followed me up the stairs. I could hear him having what sounded like another epic tantrum. Plates crash. Chair scraping. Theatrical sobs. Like father, like son, I reasoned bitterly. I sat in my bedroom listening as the ruckus downstairs gradually subsided. But I knew it was not over. Melissa would be up shortly, eager to play a role in this family drama. Sure enough, approximately 30 minutes later my bedroom door flew open. Melissa stormed in. Red-faced with rage. I'm sick of it, she exclaimed at me. Sick of you and your games? You need to grow up and pay for Ethan's education. I glanced at her calmly from where I sat on the bed. No. You and your ex can figure out how to pay for NYU. I'm sure between the two of you you can work something out. Melissa's jaw constricted. She began pacing the room like a caged animal. You're being completely selfish. He's just a teenager, for God's sake. You're the adult here, you need to be the bigger person, I observed her, remembering. She had used the same reasoning each time. Be the bigger person, Robert. Let it go, Robert. He's just a kid, Robert. Constantly making excuses. They were always smiling, nodding and opening my wallet while treating me like dirt. I took a big breath and gently exhaled. A teenager who's old enough to know better, I remarked gently. An adolescent has made it abundantly apparent how he thinks about me. Why should I invest in his future when he has only shown me contempt? Melissa paused her pacing and gently turned toward me. Her expression was frigid. Fine then. Let me make this simple for you. Either you pay for Ethan's education or I'm filing for divorce. She obviously expected me to cave, break down, cry, or beg her not to leave. To pay immediately? That is what the better man would do, correct? I shrugged. Okay. Get divorced. Her expression was almost comical. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. Apparently she did not expect me to call her bluff. I'll call my lawyer first thing in the morning, I stated with a stern voice. Until then you and Ethan can start finding yourselves a new place to live. Melissa said nothing. She just stood there staring at me almost for the first time. Finally, without another word, she turned and walked out, silently closing the door behind her. The next morning I came downstairs to find Ethan sitting at the dining table waiting for me like an ambush. The scene was masterfully staged. Ethan has red-rimmed eyes. Melissa with her finely honed expression of concerned authority. Melissa murmured. Honey. With that deceitful smile I'd never noticed before. We've all had a chance to calm down and think about things. Ethan nodded profusely, resembling a well-bred puppet. We all just overreacted yesterday, he continued, his voice thick with honey. I paused in the doorway, a peculiar sense of clarity sweeping over me. It was like I was seeing them both for the first time. I really see them. Melissa went talking, her voice adopting the reasonable tone she often used when she desired something. We're family. Families fight, but they also make up. And since you were the one who escalated things with this whole college situation, it would mean a lot if you took the first step toward reconciliation. Ethan jumped in on cue. Yeah, and if you helped with tuition, it would show that you're really sorry and want to make things right. I nearly laughed. They genuinely believed they could influence me so easily. That all it would take was some staged remorse and scripted phrases about family. Actually, I said as I reached for my cell, I just got off the phone with my lawyer 5 minutes ago. The divorce papers should be ready by this afternoon. Their expressions shifted in an instant. Ethan's phony smile evaporated, leaving his face stunned. Melissa's face flushed a familiar angry red. I turned to Ethan. Congratulations, I stated frankly. You won't have to deal with your not dad interfering in your life anymore. Isn't that what you wanted? Ethan burst into tears. This time they're real. Not the calculated ones from earlier. But I was tired of being deceived by teenage tears. Melissa rushed to her feet so quickly that her chair nearly collapsed. She stormed upstairs without saying another thing. Moments later I heard her yanking drawers open and slamming closet doors. They packed in complete silence. No more harsh speeches. No more insincere apologies. Just the sound of luggage being stuffed and doors slamming. I believed it had finally ended. I was mistaken. The messages began that same night. First from Melissa. We all said things we regret. Let's talk about this like adults. Then from Ethan. I am so sorry if I hurt your feelings, but you are really being totally unfair about college. When I said nothing, the text became more harsh. You are being obstructive and destroying this family. I hope you enjoy being all alone with your money. You'll be sorry later when you're old and alone with nobody. I said nothing. I made sure there was a prenuptial agreement so the divorce was speedy. Melissa naturally tried to oppose it. But my lawyer handled it swiftly. She received nothing. Not 1 penny of my wine bar's income. Not a single penny from my savings. I still hear about them from common friends. They live in a little apartment across town. Ethan couldn't afford NYU and now works in a mall. Melissa is striving to resume her accounting profession, but things aren't going well. Since then I've redecorated the house. I got rid of all the furniture that reminded me of them. The space feels larger these days. Lighter somehow. Or maybe it's just me. Finally liberated from the burden of attempting to purchase affection from those who were only interested in selling. Thank you for watching. For more videos like this, remember to like and subscribe.